My name is Mike Sandoval. I'm with the Department of Transportation. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I think a lot of you know what the Department of Transportation does. In many ways, we build roads, we maintain roads. One thing you may not be as familiar with is we do a lot to try and keep those roads safe. And we work with a lot of our partners that you see up here today to prevent crashes and prevent injury, and most importantly, to prevent people dying on our roadways. We're here today to talk about a very pressing and important issue of distracted driving. And I'd like to thank our speakers for coming up here and being willing to speak today on that issue and tell you what each of these agencies are doing to help prevent that action. So I want to start off first with our department and our Deputy Secretary, Lauren Hatch, who happens to be my boss, and have him come up here and say a few words on behalf of the department. So Lauren.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning, members of the media, law enforcement, and our traffic safety partners. According to the latest data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, nationwide during 2013, 3,154 people were killed, and an estimated additional 424,000 were injured in motor vehicle crashes involving distracted drivers. We believe the problem is even worse than reflected in these statistics, as people are often reluctant to report that a crash occurred because they were using their cell phone. In fact, distracted driving is just as dangerous, and in most instances, more dangerous than driving while intoxicated. Distracted driving is any activity that diverts your attention away from the primary task of driving. This includes texting, using a cell phone, eating, talking to passengers, using a navigation system, and engaging in social media while you're driving. Texting is by far the most alarming distraction because it takes the visual, manual, and cognitive attention away from the task of driving, your eyes, your hands, and your mind. The latest research on the human brain shows that our bodies release dopamine, which makes us feel good when we text or post information about ourselves on social media. Based on this physiological response, we're finding that people are actually addicted to communication. This explains why it's so difficult to simply put your phone down and drive. NMDOT, in collaboration with its media partners, will continue to launch a variety of creative campaigns to raise awareness about the dangers of texting and driving, and will continue a strong enforcement presence with local, state, and tribal law enforcement agencies. In addition, NMDOT, in collaboration with the Office of the Governor, has provided over $200,000 in funding for local, state, and tribal agencies across New Mexico to enforce our new texting while driving ban. Beginning today and continuing until April 15th, law enforcement personnel will be out in force to crack down on motorists who text while driving. This effort is part of the national You Drive, You Text, You Pay high visibility enforcement campaign. Enforcement strategies will include roving police patrols, spotters strategically located on local and state roadways, and stationary police vehicles prominently placed around communities to observe and cite violators of the law. Let's all remember that if you're texting, you're not driving. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. At the department, we partner with a lot of different agencies, counties, municipalities, and obviously anytime we want to do an initiative, we want to involve the largest city in our state here in Albuquerque. And we're lucky that the mayor has been very supportive of our efforts and very willing to participate and be a leader in this area. We're lucky to have the mayor here today. Mayor Richard Berry, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thanks. Thank you. Good morning. I just want to say it again. If you're texting, you're not driving. And that's so important, and it's so easy to remember. And I just want to say thank you to our friends and our partners in the state of New Mexico. As a mayor, anytime we talk about public safety, we always talk about partnerships. And so we have the state police with us here, obviously. We've got NMDOT. We've got Matt is here today, the Albuquerque Police Department, and others to really support April's National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. We talk about this because we care. We care about families. We have too many stories, not just in New Mexico, but all over the United States, where distracted driving has created catastrophic results and has created tragedy, and it can all be prevented. So we're here today to talk about enforcement, and we have many public safety professionals, including the men and women from APD, that will be out there making sure that people, if they're not getting the message any other way, that they may get the message if they get stopped and get a ticket and it costs them something out of their wallet. But we also want to make sure we encourage families to talk about this. So much of behavior with our young folks is emulated from behavior on part of the parent. And so we're asking parents, sit down and talk to your kids about this. Not only are our youngest drivers at the highest risk of getting into an accident because they're inexperienced, you couple that with distracted driving and it's bad medicine. And so talk to your kids, and kids, talk to your folks. I know my son talks to us about this as well, and I talk to youth around our city a lot, and I always tell them, you can be leaders just like your parents can be leaders. So when you're around the kitchen table, if mom and dad aren't talking about it, let's get the teenagers to talk to mom and dad about it. And if we do all of these things, I think we can chip away at distracted driving, and we can do it through awareness, we can do it through education, and of course, with this effort between now and April 15th, we can do it through enforcement. So all of these things come together to make sure that New Mexico's roads, Albuquerque roads, are the safest they can be. But all of this is dependent upon those who get behind the wheel each and every day and take it upon themselves to drive. And it's not a right. It's something that you have to earn, this ability to drive. And we want to make sure people take it seriously. We certainly do. And I want to thank all the leadership from the state of New Mexico, NMDOT, state police, and others for your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, for those words, and thank you for being here today. Whenever we're trying to change driving behavior, there's two really big components to that, and one is public awareness and letting people know what the new laws are, letting them know the dangers, which is why you see billboards, why you see commercials. That's one part of it. The next important part is enforcing the laws that are out there. And we're lucky today to have our two largest law enforcement agencies up here represented. We partner with them 365 days a year. They're out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we really appreciate the work that they do. And none of this can be effective without our enforcement partners. I'd like to introduce Deputy Chief William Roseman from the Albuquerque Police Department, and they'll let you know what their plans are to help with this effort. Deputy Chief.
Good morning. We were looking over this as we began, and we started looking at some interesting statistics. And one thing people don't realize is if you're going 55 miles per hour and you look down at your phone for 1 second, by the time you look back up to see the road, you've traveled over 80 feet. So within 5 seconds, you've traveled the length of a football field while you're looking at your phone trying to text. That's a lot of distance to cover, and a lot of things can happen at that time frame. So this is completely preventable to prevent accidents. There was a study I saw the other day that was showing that they previously had thought that distracted driving was responsible for roughly 10 to 15% of all accidents. And so they put some cameras in kids' cars on their consent, and it's actually showing now that roughly 60% of all accidents are because of some kind of distracted driving, whether it's texting, talking to people in the car, or reaching back for something. With our department, with our motor unit, this is something preventable, and we want to enforce it and try to help people. The other thing is those who are pedestrians need to be aware of these incidents also, because we've had a high incident of pedestrian fatalities due to distracted drivers, where individuals go across a crosswalk, but the driver was distracted and didn't see them. So this is something completely preventable. We will be out with our motor units and with our officers. They will be conducting TAC plans, as was previously said, where we'll have spotters that are looking for individuals who are texting on the phone or in the city talking on the phone, and then will be stopped down the road. So we look forward to partnering with state police and with BCSO as we try to prevent this from happening and stop the accidents. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Our other law enforcement up here represented today is our state partners, state police. And it's very important that we work closely with them because they have jurisdiction over the entire state. And that goes a long way when you're talking about some of these rural areas and these long stretches of road where they can really impact in those particular areas outside of the municipal areas. And here representing them today is Deputy Chief Jimmy Glasscock. Jimmy?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks Deputy Chief and Mayor for echoing the comments that we share. Distracted driving, including the use of cell phones for texting and checking social media while driving, is becoming an increased focus for the State Police and Motor Transportation Division and our traffic enforcement operations. I can recall as a field commander going to 2 separate fatal crashes that resulted in the loss of 2 young men's lives way too soon, and their families losing them forever. The evidence in both of these crashes were consistent with distracted driving and the possible use of an electronic handheld device. One of the most difficult tasks that any officer can face is seeing lives lost way too soon and way too early, and then having to deliver that information or that news to their loved ones. Various forms of distracted driving is the leading cause of rural highway crashes in New Mexico. Today's mobile devices such as smartphones, tablets, iPads, and similar devices can make our lives much easier. However, when used to send texts, check Facebook, check emails, or various forms of social media, they quickly threaten the lives of everyone around us. Driving on an open highway may seem like an opportune time, as the Mayor mentioned, just to glance down and take a look at your smartphone devices. But when coupled with highway speeds up to 75 miles an hour, or just that split second that you could, on a 2-lane highway, veer into oncoming traffic, it can quickly become a life-threatening situation. Just recently, the state police, working with local law enforcement agencies in Albuquerque, conducted an operation where we issued over 40 citations for texting and driving. A few tips that we would like to remind you of is to check out with your friends, family, and coworkers prior to driving and engaging in checking those devices or texting. Adults and parents, it's not just young drivers. Be good examples and stress to young drivers the life-saving importance of not using smartphones while driving. And be a good passenger. If you're with someone who's driving and using their smartphone, offer to handle that task for them. As the Deputy Secretary mentioned, distracted driving is any activity that diverts any person's attention from the primary task of driving. As part of the national You Drive, You Text, You Pay campaign, our officers in all of our districts throughout the state will be conducting anti-texting enforcement operations throughout the state. We ask for everyone to do their part to save lives and injuries on our highways by not texting and driving. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Despite our efforts with public awareness and enforcement, crashes continue to happen. And I know a lot of people think about the victims of those crashes, the people that are in those crashes. There's also other victims, and that's the families of people in those crashes, especially when someone is seriously injured or dies in a crash. It can be absolutely devastating to that family and those friends of those people that were injured or killed. We're very lucky here in New Mexico that we have a very active Mothers Against Drunk Driving agency. And here today to share with, from a victim's perspective, is the Executive Director, Ben Lewinger. So Ben?
Thank you. MAD is the state's largest victim advocacy organization serving victims and families of substance-impaired driving crashes. MAD is also one of the state's largest prevention organizations helping young people to avoid the dangers of underage drinking. So I hope that everybody will listen when I say this. Distracted driving is impaired driving. I'll say it again for emphasis. Distracted driving is, in fact, impaired driving. The more we learn about exactly how distractions can take a driver's attention away from the task at hand, the more we begin to understand that texting while driving, for example, represents similar if not greater levels of impairment as drinking and driving. The full potential of just how dangerous distracted driving is, as the line between the human driver and automobile technology continues to blur, is potentially more severe than drunk or drugged driving. And the potential for Just how dangerous it can be is something that we're experiencing more and more as the days go on. It's very easy to take for granted exactly what driving is. Piloting a 2,000-pound hunk of metal and plastic down a road while other 2,000-pound hunks of metal and plastic surround you, relying on the technology and our own reflexes and coordination to not fail. So driving, period, is very risky, and it's a dangerous activity, and I would just urge people to remember this when tempted to send that text message as they're on the road. I want to share one family story. In April of 2012, Mr. Alberto Terrazas was leaving the Chama home of his daughter-in-law, Johanna, when he was rear-ended by a teen who was looking at a text message. The young woman reported not seeing Mr. Terrazas' truck at all, as she was looking down at her phone for what she described as a split second. Mr. Terrazas was wearing a seatbelt, and he probably would have been okay if this initial crash was the only impact that he felt. But that impact actually pushed him onto the other side of the highway into oncoming traffic, where he experienced a sequence of several collisions that eventually caused his death. His family kept his spirit alive, working closely with lawmakers and the legislative to ban texting while driving statewide, in the sincere hope that other families won't experience the same fate that this family did. And the bill was signed into law of March of last year. And that's a wonderful first step. But I would ask everybody here, how often while you're driving do you pull alongside a car and look next to you and see the backlit phone shining up on their face? For me, I feel like I see it all the time. So a law is a good start, but we as a statewide community must grow very vigilant to help curb distracted driving. If you're a parent, echoing what everybody else has said, you need to model good behavior and not use your phone while you're in the car. And you need to do whatever you can to ensure that your youth do the same and avoid texting and driving and other kind of distractions while behind the wheel. Distracted driving is impaired driving. And as with the similar motto, you drive, you text, everybody pays. Thank you.